Hey y'all. Talk about a quick makeup job, right? if you jumped on when you when you saw me doing all my test runs. But I am going to be here live with my good friend Stephanie Newton. She is a LPC and a registered play therapist. I have her here via phone because Facebook decided to delete the share my conversation with a friend piece of this. And so we've been planning this for a couple of weeks, and we did not want to push off and we did not want to cancel, because what we have to share with you today is absolutely important, and it's something that I think we both are very passionate about. So sit back and enjoy this conversation. We would love for you to chime in the comments section. You know, we are here to answer questions that you have about self-care and about life balance. We're going to be sharing some information with you about self-care buckets, just kind of giving you an idea of what that looks like, how to fill your buckets, how to empty those buckets. We're also going to be giving some of our own personal examples, and we're just going to be talking about self-care as a whole and trying to help you move towards living a healthier life, a life that's more balanced, and a life that includes a little bit more self-care. So I am going to let Stephanie tell you a little bit more about herself. I have of course told you her credentials. If there's anything else that she wants to share with you, I want her to be able to do that. So Stephanie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Lashonda. Hello, everybody. Lashonda is right. So I am a licensed professional counselor, registered play therapist, and I'm also certified in trauma. I'm currently working in a primary care office where I see all kinds of different patients from all walks of life. Many who come in to our clinic who are just stressed. So what better way to start this, I guess you could say, live podcast, so to speak, with being able to talk about self-care and life balance, because we all know that we struggle with that.
And I also think it's important to point out that, you know, it is November, and we are at the peak time of like running around and trying to make sure that we get gifts and that we're doing everything for everybody else. And so this is the perfect time to talk about self-care, the perfect time to talk about life balance. And then going into the new year is the perfect time to start talking about life balance as well. You can start implementing it now, so that way when you move into 2020, it is not a New Year's resolution. It is something that you are already neck deep into doing and implementing in your life. Okay. All right. So Stephanie, do you want to kind of jump in? We have some little notes here just so that we don't miss anything. We're going to start a little with sharing a little bit about self-care and what it is and what it isn't. And so Stephanie, I'll let you kind of take the lead on that and just kind of give us an idea of what self-care looks like and what it doesn't look like also.
So when we talk about self-care, we're talking about activities that fuel us, okay? So we're talking about things that we can do that take care of our mental, emotional, and physical health and our needs. Sometimes people will do certain things that they think is an activity or something of that nature that they would assume is self-care, when it actually takes away from them. Yep. So knowing what self-care isn't is almost as important as knowing what it is. So it's not something that we force ourselves to do. It's not something that we engage in that we don't enjoy. Self-care is actually something that we do that we can enjoy with our family, or maybe that we can enjoy privately. So massages, going out with some of our friends. So there's lots of different things that we can do that that help us to just feel good about ourselves.
So one of the things that I like to point out as well when it comes to self-care, I think if you know me, you know that vacations is kind of what I use to like relax, and I call that my self-care. And so when we're talking about, you know, things that don't fill us aren't really self-care, I think about when I take vacations. You know, sometimes I'm just going to be honest. Sometimes, you know, people want to travel with me and I have to question, like, do I really want to travel with them? Because my vacation could turn into devastation, like, very quickly. So, you know, if you are trying to do something that is going to be relaxing and you know that this person, you know, brings a little bit more drama than what you're looking for right now, then that's not self-care. So like Stephanie said, if it removes joy from your life, if it removes peace and happiness from your life, then it is not self-care. If it doesn't put something back into you, into your spirit, into your soul, then it is not self-care. So definitely keep that piece in mind.
That's right, because it's pulling from you. It's taking something away from you. One thing to think about is if we think about self-care as a domain, as these different areas of our life that we need to constantly evaluate to see if we're filling these different areas up. And Lashonda and I are going to talk a little bit about that. So there's an acronym for this. It's called S.P.E.A.K.S, S-P-E-M-S. S.P.E.A.K.S is actually a Latin word for hope. So sometimes people say, well, when I think about S.P.E.A.K.S, I think about this gives me hope for a better future. So one of the first domains, or what I like to call these as buckets, that we're going to talk about is the social bucket. And Lashonda, I'll let you kind of discuss a little bit about what that is and what it isn't.
So basically, what S.P.E.A.K.S is it's talking about filling your social bucket. It's talking about filling your physical bucket. Your emotional bucket, your mental bucket, and your spiritual bucket. One of the things that I like to make note of is that you're making sure that when you're trying to fill these buckets, that you are focusing on what's important when it comes to filling that bucket. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you are feeling, you know, spiritually drained, you wouldn't go and do something that fulfills you, you know, physically. Does that make sense? So it's very easy for us to say, I'm just going to go and get a massage. I'm just going to go and get a massage. And we think that massage is going to solve our problem. But if we are dealing with something that is more spiritual, or we're dealing with something that is more mental, a massage is not going to fix that. When we're done, that problem is still going to be there. And so it's important to make sure that when you're addressing social, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, that you are tapping into each one of those things.
That's right. That's right. And when we think about social, we think about connection. We think about our relationships, the people that are so important to us in our life that really matter. And like Lashonda said earlier, sometimes we have those people, sometimes we have those family members that really can take from us. They're needy. There may be a lot of drama. And so when we think about these different domains as buckets, we think about we've got to be able to pour into it. So when we talk about connection and relationships, am I getting enough of that?
Right.
Are you getting that time with your friends? Are you getting that time with your spouse or your boyfriend who you're in a relationship with? And what about family too? The flip side of that is, am I getting too much of that with certain family members or certain friends?
Absolutely.
Is there time that I need to take for myself too?
So this is the perfect example. And even though we're talking about social, we're going to give you some examples of each one of these. But just for the sake of talking about social, I want to give you an example of what it looks like to fill that social bucket and what it looks like to empty that social bucket. So like Stephanie said, if you're trying to fill that bucket, if you're not getting enough time with your loved ones, then you're making an effort to spend time with your family. You're making an effort to plan time to go and see your dad or go and see your sister, go and see those people that you miss. But if you are overwhelmed with people, like if you are a social butterfly like myself and you are always around people, you are always doing something, then part of self-care may be emptying that bucket. So that may be taking time for yourself because you're spending too much time with friends or with classmates or with family members, and that's a little bit draining for you right now. So that's an example of, self-care can either be filling something in your bucket or removing something from your bucket, because either extreme can become too heavy, and we don't want to go from one extreme to the next extreme.
Right. And so when we think about the next one, so when we're talking about that acronym S.P.E.A.K.S, so that next bucket or that next domain would be our physical bucket. And when we think about that, because I work in primary care, we're all about the whole person. Okay. So we take a really good holistic approach to trying to treat patients. And so when I think about my physical bucket, I think about my body, I think about my healthcare habits, I think about physical activity, my nutrition, am I resting, am I getting enough sleep, am I taking my medication like I'm prescribed? So to fill that is doing those things, that's setting that time aside to make sure that, am I getting enough of these things?
Absolutely.
On the flip side of that, it could be that maybe I'm doing a little too much. So when we think about nutrition, am I overeating? When we think about our healthcare habits, have I not had those yearly checkups? Am I not taking my medication as I'm prescribed? Correct.
And so I think Stephanie hit the nail on the head when we're talking about physical bucket. And so as we go into talking about the emotional bucket, this bucket is all about giving ourselves space and giving ourselves permission to feel what we feel, whether that is positive or negative. Like, we are entitled to feel the way we feel, and we shouldn't be suppressing any of that. So emotional self-care is really aimed at helping us to not bottle up our emotions, stuff them down, but being able to express that. And so what that looks like, if you're filling this bucket, then you are expressing your feelings. You are looking for ways to ensure that you laugh during the day. You're engaging in gratitude exercises. I'm doing a lot of that right now every day. I am showing gratitude in something that I'm grateful for. But if you need to empty that emotional bucket, then what does that look like? How can I allow myself to worry in a healthy way? That's really what you're asking yourself. So we all worry. We all have something that may stress us out. So planning a time where we can worry, but we don't need to, after that time is up, we're not continuing to stay in that worrying place. Journaling. I've been doing a lot of that now. Taking time to remember those that we love. It's just giving ourselves time to feel whatever we need to feel, and whether that is emotionally, stepping away and just focusing on journaling and writing, or if that is engaging in something a little bit more. So that's what the emotional bucket looks like when you're feeling and when you're emptying that bucket.
Yes, and that, one thing that we have to evaluate when we're talking about these domains or these buckets is that sometimes we're really good at filling some of them, and then there's those others that just kind of we're good at it sometimes, right? But not all the time. And so this one is kind of a bit of a challenge for me to do this whenever I'm at home. So the next one is the mental bucket. Okay, so that's just really challenging ourselves mentally, learning to relax our brain when we need to, and that's really the caveat for good mental self-care. So how we feel that is by reading and learning something new. So for me, getting in the kitchen and trying a new recipe, by golly, that is going to be mentally challenging for me sometimes. But how I can empty that is just, I like to watch The Real Housewives. I mean, who doesn't out there? So watching TV, just doing something that doesn't require a lot of thinking, because with our jobs, it requires a lot of brain power.
A lot of brain power, and we absorb a lot as well. With what we do, we absorb a lot throughout our day. So this bucket is very important for us.
That's right. And so the next one is kind of one that's hard to define, and it's probably a bucket that we all can look at a little bit differently. So I'll let you talk a little bit about the spiritual bucket.
So the spiritual bucket, guys, it is probably the hardest to define. It's because it's aimed at recognizing things outside of ourselves, and things that are going on in our day-to-day life. So it's outside of ourselves, and it's really outside of our own day-to-day life, I guess I should say. It can be different for different people. So, it doesn't mean that you have to, believe in God. It doesn't mean that you have to believe one way or the other. Whatever your higher power is, it's what it means to us, what our spirituality means to us. And so it's important to keep that in mind. But what that looks like, as far as filling that spirituality bucket is like, reading your Bible if you read the Bible, or going to a religious service, or even just doing devotionals or prayer time for yourself, or meditation, or volunteering, anything that allows you to do something that makes you step outside of yourself and kind of take notice of what's going on around you. And then as far as emptying that spiritual bucket, how can I give myself some me time to focus on what really matters to me? That may include saying no to others. Sometimes we get caught up in saying yes, 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 that, we run out of energy, and it may include saying no to others so that we can get back to a spiritual grounding. And again, that is whatever that looks like for you. So that's why this is one of the hardest to define, because it can be reflection. It can be just being in a place of serenity and solitude. It could be going, to the lake and just listening to all of the sounds and just feeling whatever is out there for you to feel. So this is something that is personal to you. But it's something that is important as well. So it's a bucket that sometimes can get empty, and it's a bucket that sometimes can be overfull as well. So definitely keep that in mind. Stephanie, anything else that you want to add on a spiritual bucket, since it's so hard to describe?
It is. For me, I love listening to the Rick Warren podcast, Daily Hope, every morning while I am fixing myself so I don't look crazy going to work. I love that, but I also, when it's been a hard day at work, it's nice to just go out on the porch and just, be outside and just enjoy the weather. Listening to the quiet, but being in the quiet. Really.
Listening to the quiet.
Listening to just peace and quiet.
Well, that's one of the things that Stephanie and I wanted to do as well, because we are both in the mental health profession. A lot of what we do, as we mentioned earlier, it takes a toll on us if we don't figure out how to manage our buckets and manage our self-care and find our life balance. I was literally just telling my Uber driver this weekend about, how my job requires balance and how it requires me to be able to take care of myself and take the time that I need for myself. And so Stephanie and I wanted to kind of share a little bit of us with you, because we're with what we do, we are not perfect. And so there are times that we haven't cared for ourselves the best that we should have. And so we're going to just share a little bit about our story, and how we struggled with finding balance in our lives, and just kind of how we got to where we are now. Okay. Stephanie, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So about 3 years ago, I would say I was a good 70 to 80 pounds heavier than what I am now. And part of that was I was not paying attention to my diet at all. I was not physically doing any kind of exercise, so I was more of a couch potato, as we like to say. And as far as mentally, I think I was just overflowing in that area, because I would take a lot of work home, and there was no balance there. So I was up till 10 o'clock at night sometimes just doing documentation and things like that. And of course that means eating late and even forgetting to take my own heart medicine. I take heart medicine. So whenever we talk about these different domains or different areas that we really have to pay attention to, emotionally, I wasn't able to really fill that bucket up because I was filling up everybody else's, right?
Right.
Just with my job in itself. So the physical bucket, that wasn't happening. Mentally, I was getting too much of that. And then spiritually, that one was a hard one for me because I was so tired at the end of the day that sometimes going to church on Sunday just wasn't going to happen. So there was a lot of areas that I really had to improve. And it's still a work in balance, like even today. Did I get my exercise in? No. But am I scheduling that? Yes. So part of this is just recognizing when that area is getting low. When do you need to fill that up? It's really being aware of what you need to do, why you're doing it, and how it feels when you do it. That is truly the foundation of self-care and what has really helped me.
Yeah, and I like to call it, living with intention.
Yes.
That's really what it is. It's like, what are your intentions for your life, or what are your intentions for that day? It can start very small. You set your intentions and then you set your goals on how you plan to do that. Like Stephanie said, am I planning when I'm going to work out? That is setting her intention. So that's how I like to look at it as well. And Stephanie, as you were just talking, I was thinking about when you and I worked together, just the eating habits that we had, you and I, we would eat together.
Girl, we could throw down, can't we?
We could throw down some food. And so, we were both in that same cycle. And so we were doing the same job. And so even at that time, I know later you took on an even higher position. And so you probably took a lot more work home with you. But even at that time, we were taking work with us. We were taking work home with us, just to complete documentation and things like that. And so it's so easy to get lost in that cycle and stop doing what you need to do and stop caring for yourself the way that you're supposed to care for yourself. And so that leads me.
I took a lot more Sonic home too.
Girl, yes. You introduced me to lemon syrup in my Sonic water.
Oh Lord, I'm so sorry.
And I was like, oh, I'm being healthy. I'm just getting water with a little bit of lemon syrup. But that's, that's the life that we had at that time. And so that just kind of leads me into my story. Just, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was the biggest that I had ever been. And I had just gotten to a point where I was depressed, and I was unhappy, and I was overweight. And I didn't even realize that I was in such a place. I was so focused on work. I was so focused on other things that I lost track of Lashonda. Like, I lost track of all of these buckets. It wasn't until my body started failing that I started to feel ill, that I realized that something was not right for me. And so I ended up going to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, I found out that I had several things. I had polycystic ovarian syndrome. I had fibroids. I was, so overweight that I was battling with infertility. The doctor told me that I was pre-diabetic. And so, to never have heard or experienced these things in my life, to go into a doctor's office and someone tells you these things, it's scary. And, at the time I was still in my 20s. And so for somebody to tell me at the age of, I can't remember how old I was, but for someone to tell me at that age that you are right now at this moment infertile, like you would not be able to have a kid right now if you tried, that was scary for me. And it really scared me straight, I guess I should say, because what I knew, I didn't know what I was going to do, but what I knew is that one day I was going to have a kid. I still don't have one yet, but I'm working on it. I knew that I was going to have a kid, and I knew that I was not going to be diabetic. I've seen diabetes in my family, and so I knew that that was not going to be my life. It wasn't going to be my story. And so I just kind of wrote down how I filled these buckets. And I don't even think I didn't even look at it at the time as filling these buckets, but it's like my mentality shift and my lifestyle shifted, and I started filling these buckets, y'all. And I slowly started to work out at home, and that rolled over into my work. That was my physical bucket, and I didn't even know it. I started doing yoga. I started talking to my husband more. I started blogging. That was my emotional bucket. I still blog now. Blogging is a release for me. That was my emotional bucket. I started to spend more time in nature. Like, I developed this love for hiking. My husband, my friends, we would all go hiking after work. It was just this thing, and it became a thing that we did together. I started to enjoy sunsets and sunrises. On my way home, it was something that I would always take pictures of. Spiritual quotes, motivational quotes. That was my spiritual bucket. It's these simple things that we're doing that we don't even know. I started to read more, trying new recipes, trying new things. At the time, I became an online fitness coach. So just stepping outside of my box, I became a much better wife. I became a much better person in doing this. So I filled my mental and my social buckets by just bringing in people around me. And yes, I ended up losing, over 40 pounds at that time. But for me, that was one piece of it. I became a happier person, a healthier person, a more confident person. I didn't look in the mirror anymore and dislike who I was or who I had become. I didn't even realize I was doing it at the time, but when I look back, I remember looking in the mirror and not really loving who I was. And so just filling these buckets and starting to focus on myself and my health, and saying no to a lot of things and a lot of people, that allowed me to become a better Lashonda, and it allowed me to find myself again. And so that's why, women's health is important to me. And that's why self-care and life balance is important to me, because when our life gets off balance, when our self-care is not where it needs to be, we can't be anything for anybody else because we're not at our best. And so that's my little spiel and my little story on how self-care, how I didn't handle my self-care as I should have several years ago. And so it's important.
Absolutely, Lashonda. And, one thing that I have told patients is, if you've ever bought a brand new car, you know how we are just really good at taking care of it. I mean, we don't want a Sonic cup, and you better not even think about dropping a French fry in your car, right? And we're really attentive to it. Sometimes our attention can shift, and we're not really focusing on the things that are important to us anymore. And so whenever we think about these buckets, think about ways that you can plan, ways that you can schedule, so that you can make sure that you're constantly paying attention to what your needs are, so that it does get met. And when these buckets are not full, or when they're overflowing, that's where a lot of stress is created in our life. And that's where sometimes we get sick, because our immune system is just not that great, because we're staying very stressed and these needs aren't getting met.
Absolutely. And what I would say, Stephanie, is if there is one thing that you feel like our watchers can take from this entire video that we've done, this informational, I would like to call it, what would you like for them to take from this?
I think to plan, to schedule. Remember that self-care is like, it's like building a house. You gotta pour the concrete. So it's the foundation. Think about what's important to you. One thing may work for your spouse or your friend, but it may not necessarily be that thing that helps you, right? It may not fill you up. So keep it simple, and just remember to pay attention to what you do, why you do it, and how it feels, and what are the outcomes of it. Is it making a difference? So those are good questions to just think about.
Yep. And what I would like to leave you guys with is that, to piggyback on what Stephanie said, is to just make your journey personal. Make it personal for you. It's not going to look like what helped me lose weight, those little bucket things that I just went over for you. You may hate hiking. You may hate yoga. So it's not going to look exactly like mine. So make sure you're making it personal for you. And 2, make sure you're not overthinking it. When we start overthinking something, we get frustrated. We fall off track. Just don't overthink it. Go with the flow. If you fail on Monday, you get back up on Tuesday, and just know that you are worth it. You are worth being here. You are worth, you are worth thinking about, and you are worth doing the steps and doing the work. And so keep that in mind. I am always here. I love you. If you guys have any questions, I'm going to scroll. I don't think we have any questions, Stephanie. But if you guys do have some questions later, if you are watching this later, put #replay. You can also ask your questions. And I think that that wraps up everything that me and Stephanie have for you. Just keep in mind that I am going to be doing another live. I don't know the date yet, but it's going to be a little bit more on polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so I would love for you guys to be on the lookout for that. All right, Stephanie, anything before we go?
Remember that self-care is not selfish. Think about, you have to put the oxygen on you first, or you cannot take care of anybody else.
Exactly. That, you know what? That is so important, and I'm glad you mentioned that before we got off of the video, because a lot of times we think that saying no to people or choosing ourselves is selfish, and it's not. It is you are worth choosing. I wish that I could help you see that you are worth loving just as much as you love somebody else. And you are worth loving yourself at that same rate, at that same pace. So you are worth it. So definitely don't think you're selfish, guys. All right. Thank y'all so much for listening and watching with me and Stephanie. Again, if you have any questions, chime in the comments. We'll come back and answer them later. Y'all have a good Wednesday, and see y'all later.
Bye, guys.